There's two of them.
There's...
Oh, look at that! Oh my God! Oh, Jen, this is amazing.
Really, good job,
At this
everybody.
point, the joy was unreal, and each and every one of us just kept on going back and forth the boats to catch the best
Apparently there's
sighting.
one close behind.
All right, we're getting a close pass at the back.
Oh, look at that one. Oh, look at that one.
There's one more.
Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh. Oh, that was so cool.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on, Wills.
I think they'll come back up now.
Walk for your algae.
I think that
Seltzer.
yeah, because he's got all the little.
Oh, look at that. Look at...
Yeah, let's go. Okay, now back over here, everybody. Go, go, go.
Dad. Ooh.
There's two here.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Oh,
Come on,
sorry.
come on down, please.
Ah.
At this point, I have completely forgotten I was holding a phone. I wasn't even framing the shot. I was not checking focus. I'm just pointing in the general direction of everything coming up from the water. And honestly, that's the right call, because there are maybe 3 or 4 moments in your life where you are genuinely fully present, not thinking about what's next, not thinking about work, not thinking about anything except this thing right in front of you. Standing on a boat, watching a humpback whale breathe 40 feet away is one of those moments, and I'm just super glad I captured it for you guys.
All this vlogging.
Yeah.
So it surfaced 3 or more times. Each time it got a little further or sometimes a little closer. You know, that same exhale, that same slow roll, that same tiny window into a world that covers 70% of the planet, and that most of us all will never actually see.
Yeah.
And then it just dives in. This time the tail came up, the fluke, the wide dark marks with the pattern that, you know, the cruise scientists used to identify them individually. Every humpback whale's tail is very unique. It's called their fingerprint. I don't know why it's called that. It should be called a tail print. And I watched that tail slip below the surface.
I know.
And I just knew that was probably the last time I would see this specific whale. It was, you know, just moving somewhere deeper, somewhere I definitely cannot follow.
Picture of the underside of the tail, we're able to identify the whale to an individual level.
Yeah, we got Nike here.
Nike, awesome.
And we got...
Lily is our awesome whale identifier.
I know some of them.
I thought you talked my radio.
Wow. Like she's trying to identify the whales. They have names. Wow.
So wonderful, everybody. Lily has identified Nike for you and potentially Seltzer.
So the one that had all the little white spots
Ooh.
all over it was Seltzer, I think.
Seltzer.
And then
let's
this one I
add
don't know.
little
This will be a
barnacle
fun new
spots.
challenge.
So photo identification is very much current and very useful tool for studying humpbacks. So we take pictures
Lovely.
of the underside of the tail and then we add it to a really data bank. If you take a really good picture of the underside of the tail, you can also submit it.
Yeah.
That's how kind of we found out that humpbacks are migratory in the first place, because we took a picture of a whale here and then a picture of the same whale in Mexico, and we're like, that's the same whale. What happened? it's really, really good to use photo identification to track them instead of other invasive methods. Because when you're not hurting them, it's cheap, it's easy, everybody can do it, and it's actually a really, really good tool. Now, it's really fortunate to be able to see humpbacks here in the Salish Sea, because for about 30 years we didn't see any. They were completely depleted to local extinction by commercial whaling.
Wow.
So for decades, no humpback whales in the Salish Sea. I was telling you that they transmit that knowledge of the feeding ground and the breeding ground, and they travel to the same place every year. Well, that knowledge was simply gone because we removed all of the whale here. They were used to make soap, the blubber, like to make soap, to make lubricant for machinery. The baleen, which are those plates that they have in their mouth, were used to make umbrellas and paintbrushes, you know, very useful stuff. And many of.
Hey. Right there. Wow, it's really coming close to the board.
See those circles? Those are called footprints. So
Footprints.
but we can see that pectoral fin. See how that
Look at that. Oh, they went by really fast. Hi, Will. Look at that.
yeah, I don't think it's funny that they name these circles footprints. But what you're seeing is actually the surface tension being broken from the sheer force of that whale. Right? So that's why we see that circle.
Oh, there are three of them here. Ooh.
They're eating lunch.
They are. It is lunchtime.
They're eating.
And it's primarily that one muscle they use.
They'll eat snack and once in a while in the water.
Oh, okay, so we are currently on another, decided on a different like ecological space, just to see like other wildlife. You can see a sea lion over there. Oh, that's a sea lion. Oh, so this area of the ocean like has other wildlife. I bet they just know, like they know the different spots where you can see different ecological things. Yeah, that's a sea lion napping over there. Look at that. I think it's a baby sea lion. Ugh. A female sea lion can be pregnant for nearly a year and only actually grow the pup for about 8 months of that. The rest of the time, the embryo just waits, floating. And nobody really talks about how weird that is. Every summer, thousands of sea lion pups are born on this BC coast within the same few weeks. How that happens, when mating season was almost a year earlier, the answer is one of the strangest tricks in nature. So another interesting thing you have to know about sea lions is that these animals mate according to dominance. Okay, let me just break it down. Technically, dominant male sea lions can mate with about 10 to 20 female sea lions in one mating season. What that means is that the dominant male sea lions cast away the not so dominant ones, and they come here on these rocks. That's the male sea lions who are not as dominant. Technically, they are called losers. That's what the scientists said, not me. I didn't say that. Basically, the losing male sea lions come out here to nap and wallow away in quote and unquote their misery while waiting for the next mating season to potentially find a mate. Oh, isn't that just very, I don't know, kind of pathetic, but I mean, nature will do what nature does best.
So there's two different species of sea lions that we can see here. Stellars are the most northern and largest actually sea lions in the world.
Oh, look at that. Look at that one napping.
Now we're very excited to be seeing sea lions because they've actually just kind of returned. The main season or best season to be seeing sea lions here is the winter time. Because again, a bit like our seal, it is mating season, but their strategy is very different. Males will migrate during the summer to these rookeries, which are specific areas where females and pups will hang out to try and mate. So that's why we don't see many sea lions right now. They've all gone and migrated. These ones that have returned are kind of the losers. They are. Because
Wow.
the way their strategy works, it's called a harem reproductive strategy. They fight, that's why these males are so big for space. And then the one male that wins reproduces with all of the females in that territory. That represents only 10% of males that actually get to reproduce. So as they're unsuccessful, they gradually come back here, lay on the rock as you just saw them do, be a bit stinky, growl at each other, and then wait for 2027 to be there again. So in the winter time,
So
so
dating is hard in every species. It's hard
in
outside.
winter time, you can see up to
Oh, look at that.
1,000 sea lions around Race Rock, and that's not a thing.
Oh, stinking here.
On them further, go to the other side. You can
Ah,
see the island of Race Rock here. Beautiful lighthouse.
sorry, is that the island? It's called what island? The name
Race
of
Rocks.
Oh,
So
Race.
this whole area is called Race Rock. The Great Race, specifically. There is somebody that lives in that white house with the red roof. They're not quite a lighthouse keeper as the lighthouse is nowadays automated, but they're what we call an eco-guardian,
Wow.
which means that they maintain the grounds, but they also do lots of important work with Pearson College, which is just the other side on Vancouver Island, making sure that the animals here are not entangled, doing things like that, reporting, and also doing surveys. So that's how I know that you can see 1,000, even up to 15. Really, eco-guardian will be doing it.
So they just get supplies from boats?
Yeah, you can get your supply. It's a different person, a different time of year.
Yeah. Oh,
But
okay.
the boat can like get in and they'll drop off here. Actually, Laura at the front did it just in spring for 2 weeks, so she can tell you more if you want. But some people stay a few weeks, some people will stay a few months. And there's a bald eagle, folks, on the rock over there. So if you just look at our 11 o'clock, there's a white spot. That's a bald eagle. It's gonna be on our starboard for now. I don't know how close we can get, but just pointing out that white pin on the rock there, we might turn around again. There's a lot of things to see, so we might come back.
Oh, look at the seals.
I do want to point out these beautiful kelp forests. So all the seaweed, the algae that's floating at the surface, that is old kelp. That's the algae that Humpback was trying to play with.
So the things floating are called sea kelp. Basically.
There wouldn't be any of the life that we see in the sea.
Oh wow.
This is exactly
So basically these are the things that the humpbacks were rolling on back when we saw the humpback whales.
It's what we call an ecosystem engineer. It provides structure and habitat for up to 800 different species. And it's also a photosynthetic organism. So just like plants, it will use the sun's energy and CO2 to provide oxygen and food for the rest of the food chain in the ocean. But not just for ocean critters, for us too. Over 50% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. A lot of people don't know that, but we depend on these kelp forests for the air that we breathe. I think we're going to try to get closer to this eagle. It's probably still going to be on this side. You don't have to move, okay? But
And that's the bald eagle. The bald eagle over there sitting on the rock. Oh my god. Oh. Look at that. Look at how majestic it's sitting.